soil plantation is permanently damaging the symbiotic relationship of the forest. These systems cannot be revived again as they are a result of millions of years of evolution. The clearing of forest would itself emit tons of greenhouse gases, furthering the impact of climate change. The terrestrial systems, such as soil health, rainwater, or other weather systems, everything is impacted by this change. So it is also indirectly impacting other parts of the forests. And the last thing is the indigenous populations are forced out of their land and displaced. So this sounds bad, right? But there's much more to it. The deforestation of this plot A just sprawls through its edges and impacts the forest systems itself. Due to habitat loss or lack of food and water resources, change in weather patterns, the mobility is impacted, and hence it leads to forest degradation. The biodiversity is lost and the carbon stocks are lost, which actually increases emissions. So in this case, the forest has become an emitter rather than a sink itself. So what happened? We discussed, like, this was discussed in UN long back. As a result, a program known as UN RED, it's United Nations Reducing Emissions for Deforestation and Forest Degradation, was adopted within FAO, UNDP, and UNEP. This program was specifically aimed at implementing the strategies in developing countries. So let's talk about RED for a minute. What is it? So RED as a project focused on areas where existing forests were at risk, or there was a risk of reduced carbon storage. A current example would be Brazil. The program promoted management, conservation, and increased forest stocks by, like, this is where the caveat was, by encouraging public and private investment. So it basically remunerated to keep the forest alive without cutting them down as a measure to prevent greenhouse gases. So they're just like, I'm going to give you money, just don't cut the forest, because it would increase the emissions. And as a result, the forest land became a commodity that could be sold in the market within the carbon market. So RED was used as an offset in the carbon market itself. So a lot of talk about forests, but how does all these policies define forest? You can see that FAO and UNFCCC have a very generous definition on what forest is. They include agricultural land, plantations, industrial plantation, everything technically as a forest. So these definitions do not differentiate. So if you take a land of forest, chop it down, make sugarcane plantations on top of it, it's still technically considered a forest as long as there's a 10% tree cover on the land. So in a case study of Indonesia, a report finds that total number of deforestation between 2000 and 2009 was 4.9 million hectares when using the FAO definition. It was 18% higher when used for UNFCCC definition. And it was 27% higher when we use the definition that was based on the research. So the ambiguity in these definitions are one of the main concerns why loggers might keep on exploiting till they reach the national threshold, leading to forest degradation and huge biodiversity loss, especially with rainforests. This line graph illustrates the deforestation of according to different definitions that we discussed previously. As we see, it's peaking in 2016. Apparently, it's the same year that RED Plus was the most transacted item in the voluntary carbon markets. So you could see that the entire program, or including it offset or putting it a financial incentive, is actually not decreasing deforestation at any point. It's actually peaking when the market is going up for the money. But regardless of definition, the deforestation has been increasing at significant rate after implementation of policy. It has not made a big change. So let's look at emissions as well, because the policy tries to say that, okay, we are looking into deforestation because of emissions. So let's see if the emissions have reduced at all. Again, this is comparing the amount of carbon stored in a typical forest land. And under this policy, the forest land is directly dependent on carbon storing capacity. We do not have enough information on how carbon is stored, because a thriving forest can store a lot of carbon, but it has biodiversity, it has fungal connections, and it has a lot of elements to it. So if we just consider trees, it won't be an accurate depiction of what carbon storage looks like. In this case, it would be justified to sacrifice a boreal forest instead of a eucalyptus plantation, just based on the carbon storage. And so this system does not give any importance to local ecosystems at all. The trend follows for emissions associated with deforestation as well. The choice of the definition that you take can largely impact on how you're estimating or how you can assess the drivers of deforestation or emissions, and also on the development of reference emission levels. So let's go back to our forest land example. This plot is still considered a forest and hence can be remunerated within the policies. Like, it's crazy. The policy loop led to creation of financial market for carbon stocks. And the market started drawing attention from private investors, big farmers, government officials, and transnational corporations, because they could easily offset their own emissions within the scheme. So the value and market for forest land increased tremendously, and protected forests were now on sale for the biggest polluters. As the program remunerates forest owners, big farmers and local authorities started displacing indigenous population and peasants, leading to mass land grabbing and migration. The indigenous territories encompass of 22% of world's land surface, but that are the areas that have 80% of the world's biodiversity. That's huge. They have generational understanding on how to conserve their own land. This land is usually managed by a community without individual legal proprietorship. So due to industrial lobby, corruption, land rights were snatched from this population and transferred for so-called environmental projects. As the land ownership was transferred, it often led to biodiversity loss, as well as carbon stock loss, because according to these policies, carbon are just stored in trees and sometimes in soil, but they wipe out everything else from the forest, and that leads to a huge carbon loss in itself. This leads to degradation of forest, ultimately resulting in deforestation for industrial farming, adding up to the current emissions itself. Meanwhile, indigenous population and peasants are left with no livelihood, leading to migration and environmental injustice. These environmental atrocities are now being identified as ecocides, as such drastic changes have been made to the environments and their livelihood itself. So looking at this map, This is 54 out of 65 UN RED partner countries. We can understand the scale of land grabs. We can see how frequent it has become. And most of the land grabs are driven by farming and livestock, as we saw that farming is actually considered a forest. So you can just keep on destroying land and grabbing it and still technically be called a forest and get remunerated on it. With 46% is just agriculture. Forestry and land use activities were often used to offset this in 2018, they were used to offset 50.7 megaton of carbon dioxide, creating a financial market of 171.9 million USD in voluntary carbon market. We have to keep in mind that this financial incentive has not reduced any deforestation or emissions. It has in fact resulted in environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, and ecocides. This is a policy loop we are in. We have, We have credits such as RED Plus, and there are a lot of credits like this, which are used to offset emissions under carbon markets. This creates a demand and monetary value for the forest or whatever resource that is up in offset systems. That results in grabbing those resources and killing the ecosystem itself, which leads to deforestation or loss and degradation of the resource itself. And then when the degradation increases, we again go back to saying that, oh, the emissions are increasing. Let's make more policies and offset more stuff so we can get everything in control. RED is a major issue as it is traded within carbon markets. So let's take a minute and understand how carbon market works and how it is implemented. I'll not go in all the text detail. I'll just explain with an example. Let's say there are company A and B, and the government has 4 megaton that this city can produce. So the polluter A gets 2 of the megatons, and the polluter B also gets 2 megaton. The first polluter is making much more pollution and needs more credit. So they ask from polluter B if they can lend them one and they can pay instead. So this happens when there is internal cap and trade. So in theory, the government would keep on reducing the cap, and eventually we would transition to a cleaner energy and better markets. But there's a caveat here. In terms of when there is trade, you can also do emission offsetting. So for instance, the company can keep on making 3 pollution for next 500 years if they can keep on buying offsets from these other places. So in an example, there's a company in US can actually keep on buying land or leasing land for environmental projects in Africa or Peru and keep on having business as usual. So this actually does not reduce offset. In theory, this does not result in actual offset reduction or carbon reduction. There are new emerging terrestrial, aquatic carbon sequestration programs that have distorted the boundaries between the climate change mitigation and resource grabbing. The blue-green economy initiated these carbon complexes where programs focus on natural sinks of forest, farmlands, and oceans. It intends to conserve carbon and not the ecosystem through green initiatives such as RED for forests, climate smart for farmlands, blue carbon initiatives for oceans. This have initiated a new phase of green grabbing, where land and resources are grabbed with a private agenda in the name of environmental projects. The world is just beginning to commodify complex natural systems into linear capitalist systems. The idea of privatizing natural resources by putting in economic value is clearly not working out for us. The threats could amplify beyond magnitude if not restricted and stopped immediately. The solution is to target the problem at the source and mitigate it. The future should essentially be defined by the policies protecting the vulnerable and actual conservation rather than transnational corporations taking the lead in it. Hence, to wrap up my presentation really quick, I think I'm running on time. I would like to request everyone to look into these intricate policies that impacts all of us globally, just to take some interest and see how this can be impacted to everyone. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Saloni. That was great. I believe we should have a lot of questions after your beautiful explanation of how the carbon offset system is a farce, right? So thanks thanks for doing that. Any questions from the floor? Do we have any? Please feel free to unmute yourself and. So I'll start off, Saloni. You had this really nice chart where you had all the different forests, and you were showing us the difference between, say, a plantation versus the different types of forests. And of course, you mentioned, a number of times about the ecosystems that are destroyed when you actually remove these forests. So I was wondering, the complexity is massive here, right? Like it's an explanation of these complex topics through the ways that you've done is extremely important. But also, like, the fact that we, by not accounting for the ecosystem, it's sort of like an externality is not visualized or not understood. Of course, you have the text to follow, but I just want to know your opinion on how does this complexity, how does one go about simplifying that, and what is your strategy around that? Thanks.
Yeah, actually, I've been working on for quite a while to simplify these policies and trying to understand how each portion of the ecosystem is impacting and what all it is impacting. But sometimes the data is so multi-leveled and it's beyond, like, there like literally no research when I was trying to find like what is everything in Amazon, like what all impacts in Amazon forest. Or for those kind of research, you have to actually go on field, live with indigenous people who have been living there for generations, do knowledge transfer, and then start writing about it. So I haven't came across a lot of research that have done that. So I'm still looking into it. Right now, I'm actually working on a project by myself where I'm trying to list and make a huge network graph of everything that encompasses in a rainforest in Africa, and how it can impact their national, international, and overall weather of these systems. So I'm currently working on it, but it's all work in progress.
Right. So the same way that we could sort of visualize the entire universe, right? You want to create those kinds of networks, or like a brain map, but you want to create a map for, say, a particular region of the world. Is that?
Yeah, but like I'm also, my main intention of my research has always been to simplify things so that other people can understand what's going on. because I realized there's a huge gap between like researchers who have been working on it for years and people like policymakers or any lay person whose life is actually impacted by it or who are making decisions on it. But there's a huge knowledge gap. So my entire work focuses on it. So when I try to create those charts or those networks, they become overcomplicated. So the like one of the major things that I'm working on is just simplifying everything into a bite-sized information so people can take it.
No, it's beautiful. Now, one suggestion that I have for your eucalyptus one is that you could actually say that the water emissions or water consumption for eucalyptus is like massive. I'm sure you already know that. But
Oh,
like if you were
absolutely,
to like
yes.
switch, that could like actually switch the entire order. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yes.
All right. Sorry, I've been hogging all the questions. Uh, we have a hand up by Saurabh, and I think
Yes,
for Magnus also wanted to ask something. Yeah, go ahead.
yes. Hi everyone. Hello, Saloni. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation. Uh, I have one question. I was trying to follow the presentation. So I understand that in the beginning of the presentation, you try to give the impression about that there's a lack of standardization in terms of defining the problem. And then there are various actors who utilize the lacunas in these the gaps in these definitions, and they try to use it for their own purpose, and the problem still remains the same. So what I was particularly interested into, what is your view about uh, the drivers which actually cause this sort of problem? Like from the business side, like there are various enterprises who want to uh, utilize these natural resources and these ecosystems for their own benefits. In your research, what did you conclude? What we can do about these businesses? Shall we look into regulations, or what can be done about these peoples? Because no matter what kind of policies or systems we create, unless there are some actors who see their own personal benefit, they will continue to exploit these natural resources. What is your view about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some, for first and foremost, like transnational corporations can only be uh, limited. Their interaction can only be limited by very strict policies. Like I don't think any transnational corporation would self-reflect and be like, oh, I did a wrong thing, I should stop doing it. No, like their whole intention is making money and their financial capacities. So first and foremost, defining forests in a way that they include biodiversity and all the elements, and protecting it from leasing it or clearing it. That is the second thing. The third thing is the facilities from a developed country, which has all the resources and which has strong labor laws, strong human right laws. It should be prohibited to transfer
Mhm.
facilities from those countries to developing countries where they are essentially uh, exploiting the worker, the land, and everything that belongs to the other country for a very small
Okay.
financial incentive. Uh, as a generation, we should look on degrowth, food sustainability, less food wastage, because as we see, a major driver is agriculture itself. And we right now produce enough food to feed the world. Like there should be no hunger in theory. But we are still going in the era of overconsumption where we want more and more. So as a generation, we need to start looking into degrowth and how we can work our systems through it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes. That answers my question. answers my question, Saloni. But just on a follow up, like I just want to share something. I think few days back, I was attending a webinar where I learned about the story of Body Shop. You know, it's a brand Body Shop for cosmetics and all. And I think there was someone shared a story that they make some product which has some raw material which comes from Amazon forest. And they were sharing a story that what Body Shop did is that they they started paying the money to people who were previously cutting the trees to not cut the trees. They said like we'll pay you 3 times more if you don't cut the trees, and they try to match the demand cycle for their products with the natural way the forests grow. So whatever raw materials they're getting from the forest, but they decided not to cut the trees and try to get the raw materials in the way which is not degrading the forest in the end. But ultimately it reduced, like there were cases when people came to Body Shop and they asked for products and they said, sorry, we don't have the product. But if you come in this particular season, we'll be able to provide you the product because at that point of time, we'll have the necessary raw material. So I found that this story very interesting that this is how the businesses are going to be impacted because they will have the supply chain issues and not have product on their shelves. So yeah, I just heard this story, so I just thought of sharing with you like these kind of things can also happen. What do you think?
That's fantastic. I would really look into it. I'm looking at all kinds of case studies, like the positive ones, the negative ones, and how big corporations, small corporations, medium level market cap organizations are working towards it. So this is a very interesting thing. I would definitely look into it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Saloni. Yes.
We have run out of time for this particular presentation, but thank you for your sharing and participating at such an odd hour. And next up, we have Zijing Song, who is going to be talking about narrating climate change, speculative data stories in comic form for affecting climate action. And so Zijing is here, and I'm sure she's going to share her screen.
Yeah, can the organizing team help me play our pre-recorder presentation?
We have arranged so I will play the pre-recorded presentation, and then Lillian will take some questions after that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Just give me 1 minute here, or not even 1 minute. I need to do. This is what I need to do. Yes.
Before the presentation, I will share our data comic link for everyone in the chat room.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That should be fine.
Yeah.
I will start it now.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Zijing Song, a Year 1 PhD student at City University of Hong Kong School of Creative Media. I'm speaking on behalf of Yating Sun from Academy of Art University and Ray LC from City University of Hong Kong School of Creative Media. I will present our work, Drizzle, a data comic magazine we produce for positive climate change influence. As we all know, climate change is a major crisis of our generation, but people often regard climate change issue as remote and impersonal. Therefore, changing the mindset of non-scientific communities and climate change skeptics is difficult. Climate communication strategies should use more personal strategies like storytelling and visual communication to develop pro-environmental behaviors and attitudes. These long-term behaviors for social good need to activate intrinsic motivation, which can develop when experiencing narratives along with particularly social purpose. We can find in this page, on the physical level, climate change involves a lot of phenomena like consumption, natural resource limitation, increase in population, and lack of policies in sustainability. These issues are not addressed here since directly imposing evidence and scientific facts on the public is not an effective way to change human behaviors. Therefore, creative climate communication is needed. We intend to address this issue on a human level, addressing phenomena like immediate gratification, human myopia, taking confront in ignorance, belief in lack of individual influence, and more. Therefore, we use the medium of the comic, which can easily capture even climate skeptics' attention and promote climate awareness by using appealing visual communication. We apply a novel genre of data comics, which combine design fiction and data visualization in the form of comics to generate an appealing and persuasive climate action narration. Design fiction means producing artifacts. In this case, it's the data comic magazine that allows us to narrate the possible future and take an implicit way to affect people. Well, in the next few minutes, let me share the project video of this creative climate communication. In the next part, I will introduce the project background. This is the big picture of our research topic. Evidence suggests that narratives can strengthen the attitude-behavior relationship. So reading climate fiction may help activate pro-environmental behavior in individuals who already have strong pro-environmental attitudes. Based on the previous research, climate fiction leads to greater public understanding of negative consequences caused by climate change compared with reading about research. However, there is no strong evidence to show climate storytelling is more persuasive than communicating evidence in real life. This is also the gap we want to address. In scientific communication, illustration plays significant roles as visual explanation that reflect the complex concept. Comic can engage wider audience with its visual and character-driven approaches. Therefore, comic and visualization become more effective in climate communication. Additionally, speculative visualization has the potential to combine data visualization and graphic design to show data in a meaningful and effective way while being accessible to general public. Therefore, combining the influence of design fiction and data visualization may create more effective climate change communication. To effectively achieve data visualization and engage viewers in decoding message and making informed decisions beyond the limitation of complex data, more recent attention has focused on the data comics. It applies the narrative concepts and visual information of traditional comics to express data-related insights. In the following part, I will introduce more details of our data comics drizzle, including story designs, comic designs, and exhibition plan. As is shown in this page, the work may be read as a simple comic rather than a form of climate fiction, and the titles of story also reflect subtle cues. We designed 5 stories to address different human phenomena related to climate change. including Sonia McDougall, New Revolio, VO, Redemption Park, and Every Flash of Light is the Song of Another World. And all these stories are related to our design purpose. For example, Sonia McDougall mentions countering myopia. New Revolio tells a story about community of sharing. Redemption Park's attempt to fix the waste problem will emphasize the significance of individuals' efforts, and Every Flash of Light is the Song of Another World mentions individual responsibility. Well, I will use the first story, Sonia McDougall, as an example to tell more details about our comic design. It's a story based on the structure of rebirth. It tells the story of a shoe business entrepreneur named Sonia who must make a decision about her company, whether to invest in long-term research and development or to push the product widely to the general public. In her personal life, she takes the approach of immediate needs and gratification, as opposed to settling down. Then after choosing to maximize profit in her professional life, the business fails, teaching Sonia an important lesson in the rebirth scene. She realized she should consider a long-term plan and decide to take action in her personal life, to finally settle down with her boyfriend. The illustration uses a science fiction comic book style which is more suitable to show the story scene. The yet-to-be-produced shoes, which works in any weather and can predict the rain using electronics. To show the turning point in Sonia's life after the business failure, we showed eyes open on a mirror to indicate self-reflection. Then the shoe business building a diagonal position to indicate failing, followed by eyes closing, which signals the rebirth structure that also hope to change the audience's own viewpoint from immediate need to long-term views. This movement built the change undergone by the character using aspect transitions as a way to apply environmental storytelling to the work. The rebirth scene is emphasized in the recurrent science structure during Sonia's two encounters with her boyfriends. To achieve data visualization, one panel with a graph was added to show the increase in randomness of day-to-day rainfall, which is used to support the idea of research and development for future gains of the company in order to create smart rainproof shoes. To keep the balance between data and context in our work, we are in pushing forward the narrative. A distribution map on typhoon incidents in current and future times was given in the storytelling line. Please note that we use the narrative data instead of real data since we attempt to tell the story of future situation. Another story I want to talk in detail is New Revolio. The character Winston experienced a memorable trip since the shipwreck, and the visitors had no choice but to survive in the Antarctic. During the trip, they learned everything you consume is what you produce, and the two panels in New Revolio are examples of data visualization. First, a graphic map implicitly explains the main reasons for the shipwreck, the melt of glacier caused by the global warming. In the following turning point, a heated discussion about the social views among two groups of characters, scientists and businessmen, occurred, and one scientist put forward a reasonable solution to distribute food equally. Then, the food distribution plan is visualized using graphics that not only indicate the idea of the plan, but also use the form of the data graphic in showing people and their carbon footprint to narrate the idea of sharing responsibility in the context of the story. And thanks so much for the DACA exhibition team. Our data comics drizzle is also exhibiting physically and online in this month. Well, in the final section, I will introduce our research funding to explore how people evaluate the influences and the effectiveness of two selected climate comics, Sonia McDougall and New Revolio. Online surveys are conducted. The questionnaire was divided into 5 sections, including basic information, reaction to Sonia McDougall and New Revolia, the purpose of comics, self-report of climate attitudes, and a donation game, which can be found via the web page link in this page. The questionnaire was made and distributed in the Google survey form, and participants were recruited and paid through an online research participant recruitment platform, Qualitative. We collected 43 feedback. We used R&R Studio to process and analyze the data. The participant short response to questions about interpretation of particular aspects of the story was qualitative coded and analyzed. Well, first I will talk about our quantitative funding. In general, participants reported being quite positive about the way the design of story and data visualize contributes to learning about climate change. Especially in the Sonia McDougall story, there's a significant difference between the way people perceive the climate change purpose as opposed to the edification over physical resource level, indicating that the story designs lead readers to consider the idea of future-directed thinking, the causing of the story, more than the physical aspect of climate change. However, the positivity about climate change can be due to the self-reported support of climate change. For the climate change attitude scale revealed a general agreement of over 80% about full scale in every question in the survey. For example, in the question, how strongly do you believe the facts and data of climate change? And the question, how strongly do you agree climate change will impact future generations and more? This indicates that readers already report highly on pro-climate attitude. Therefore, the story may not be tested against a population that are climate change skeptics. Well, let's move on to the final part, the qualitative funding. When asking about the story-based questions, including individual reaction to specific story plots, graph, and the decision of character, future development of stories actual, participants got a better understanding based on data visualization, including visual symbols, colors, shapes, and size. In particular, they mentioned the benefit of data visualization for aiding credibility and acceptability to narrations in comics. However, some participants may reconsider the rationality of stories based on the accuracy of data shown in comics. Therefore, designers should be more cautious in selecting and presenting reliable and scientific data in the storytelling context if they are used to persuading traditional argument strategy. For instance, several responses queried the fairness of the distribution plan shown in the graphic based on the personal understanding and reflection. In addition, response from participants who already have good climate change awareness suggested that data comics is a more engaging form for viewers. For example, participant 44 mentioned that I'm already well informed on the subject, but it definitely engaged my interest and blah blah blah. However, several participants mentioned that data may become exaggerated and fictitious during the process of visualization. For example, participant 6 said that the data in the comic is more fictional than the scientific data. Also, participant 8 said that the comic may be present some exaggeration due to the impacts in the viewer and also add some color and shapes. In summary, also participants may feel confused about the accuracies of data in comics and fictional story. They still prefer data comics as a creative climate change communication. Like participant 14 mentioned, the data from the comic is very generalized and imprecise, but it is expressive and attracts the reader's attention. Based on the analysis of participants' willingness to adopt pro-climate change action, a limitation of data comics was the lines of stories. Participants emphasized the significance of the lines of storylines, which can make audience immersive in the story's environment. On the other hand, participants also point out that they realize that the urgency of climate change not only from reading these climate action comics, just like participant 36 said, not from the comic alone. Therefore, to further support the effectiveness of data visualization in climate comics, designers should think more about the connection between narrations and specific situations in reality, which may enable users to take pro-climate change behaviors. Just like participant 14 mentioned, it is important to show specific situation with which the reader can identify and imagine himself in the future. That's the end of my presentation, and thank you so much for your listening.
Thank you, Zijing. That was great. A lot of food for thought. So maybe I'll open up the floor for questions to the speaker, as we have her in person here. Please.
Yes, so thank you very much, Lillian and the team for really very nice projects and a good presentation too. I maybe I missed, but in the way that you gather feedback and the analysis that you do of people's perception, um, uh, did you try to somehow check on how much they understood of the message that you intended to convey? Could you sort of measure this, that they understood 75% or they understood 50% of the total meaning? And would that be interesting to do?
Well, in our survey, we just ask our participants rate to selected data comic stories and try to answer 7 questions based on story plots and storyline. To be honest, we just want to measure how much our data comic affect their climate change awareness, and can data comic really allow users to take pro-environmental actions. But to be honest, since it's really difficult for us to find people who are not believe climate change evidence, so this is also the problem we want to address in the future.
Can I push you a little bit on that? Can you show the specific questions that you had in the survey? Those 7.
Yeah, no problem. I can send.
You can share your
Can
screen.
I send our survey link? Let me find it.
I think it's a very important point, and I really think it's great that you have done this work and the evaluation as well. I mean, it really enriches the whole project, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, we put all the survey questions and the data on the website. Maybe I can share my screen.
Okay, it's in the chat.
Is it works?
I don't know.
Let me check.
I don't know. It didn't quite work. Can you? I don't know. If it's difficult, then maybe we can take it
Yeah,
offline.
yeah, please wait a minute. Let me check it.
Yeah. There's something wrong with the link. Maybe somebody else can also try.
Do we have any other questions meanwhile? I see Ray has responded via chat.
Oh, maybe that's a better link. Yeah. This link works that Ray just shared, or that Zijing shared. Okay.
And all research questions and the data can be found in this webpage.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Jizing. I want to just ask one small question. This is Saurabh Vij. I'm a PhD student at the School of Energy and Environment at CTU. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I was just thinking like, I really like this idea of using comics to bring more climate awareness, climate change awareness amongst people using data and visualization. I was thinking like my daughter is 8 years old and she attends Zoom classes, and every week they have some talk about sustainable development goals and these issues. I was thinking like, did you give a thought about like how this idea of comics can influence thinking of kids and youth? Did you have any thoughts about that? Like if the kids read these sort of comics, how their thinking can, change and they'll become more aware about climate change. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your question and thanks for your suggestion. Maybe in the further steps, we can think about how data comic can influence mainly focus on young children to take pro-environmental action. Since just as you said, comic is very famous in the community of young people. Maybe we can also create data films or data or others appealing or interesting mediums of climate communication.
Yes, I really like the presentation because I've seen like when the kids, especially I've observed my daughter, when you provide her with technical information, with data, they lose interest. But if you tell them a story in terms of what's going on, they can immediately connect with what's going on. And but the only issue is that they should be prompted to take positive actions. So I think the storytelling can really help them. So when I saw the comics initially, I was thinking like, oh, I can get this comics for my daughter and she can read it and she can find it interesting. But later I realized, oh, maybe it's not appropriate for her age, considering the issues which are tackling. But yeah, but a simplified version could be great. So it just came to my mind, so I thought of sharing it with you. But thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Do we have any other questions from the floor?
Yeah, I'll ask one more question. So comics is sort of halfway in between a literary text and an animation film, let's say, somewhere halfway. If you pursue this line of work, would you stay in the comics domain, and would you have plans for such further studies? research into how comics can affect people in this way?
To be honest, I'm not working on this research. Well, I think oh yeah, my for for me, Drizzle is the only project I will work on to explore how narrative design can affect people's climate change action. But yeah, our partner, Dr. Ray LC, also sent some message in the chat room. Maybe we can, yeah, sorry. I'm not sure. Does he want to talk about this question?
You mean this question for you? I think for Maddie, it's just saying like, as opposed to just comics, what kind of media might be interesting to explore? I think that's what he meant. Yeah.
Oh yeah. For me, I will only focus on comic.
Okay. Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everybody. So we are we at the end of the session? It does seem like it. Do we have any other further questions from the floor? If not, I think we can end this session, and we'll reconvene in about 1.5 hours. So we were 10 minutes. We ran 10 minutes longer than what we were supposed to. So you get a shorter dinner break, and then we will see you back for the keynote. So see you then.